Yo, and welcome back to the Banter Boys podcast. My name is Sanji. With me is Fletch. How you doing, boy?
How you doing, my friend?
How you doing, buddy?
I think I'm supposed to say welcome.
It's okay. You just woke up.
Sounds like we both did.
yeah, a little bit. Just a little bit. One of us is in a very different time zone and shouldn't have an excuse, but it's the weekend. We're allowed lines in the weekend. How's your morning been so far?
So far, so good. Got the coffee down the hatch, ready to roll.
Are you prepared for the incoming number 2 baby as well?
As prepared as I will be. This is a good test.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I think let's get started because we're both on a bit of tight schedules at the moment. So let's jump straight into the fan introduction segment. Tell us your name, your Twitter handle, the club that you're representing today, where you're from, and a little bit about what you do.
Sure. So my name is Fletch. I think this is our 3rd or 4th year doing this for West Ham. Twitter handle's @FunkFletch, not overly active, but definitely use it for fan Trax information primarily. West Ham supporter. I live just outside of Boston, grew up in New York, and I work in finance.
Lovely. Yeah, it's always fun, when I debate with my related extended family, my brother-in-law and his dad. They're both Hammers fans as well. And last couple of years, I mean, Chelsea has been crap, let's be honest, right? And West Ham have done well. They've won European trophies, etc. So yeah, this is going to be a fun conversation because usually when you come on these pods, you're very down and it's like, we've not done anything. We might get relegated. I remember last time we recorded as well. It was right after you sold Rice. You haven't bought anyone. You were like the last club to buy. You bought literally everyone. And now it's pretty much kind of the same thing. There's a lot of fancy, shiny new toys that I can't wait to touch on, right? So welcome back to yet another Inside Trax series episode, listeners. We're here to talk everything Hammers. Quick breakdown for how these episodes go. We've got 3 main segments. First one is a bit of a general discussion. We're going to talk about the change in manager, which is quite relevant for this situation. Any changes in ownership, let's say, as well, coaching. Then we're going to talk about the club's previous season's performance versus new season's expectations. And that's going to tie into all system versus new system, basically the impact of transfers as far back as last summer, expected formation and starting 11 for the upcoming 24-25 campaign as well. And then obviously we're going to chat some fan tracks. We're going to get Fletcher's first pick from West Ham, his next 3 picks, which rounds he takes them, at least 1 hidden gem and at least 1 trap. And obviously we're going to round things off by picking Fletcher's brain in terms of getting some fan tracks advice. How does he trade picks? How does he, make FA claims? How does he spend his fab? And much, much more. All right, let's get started. I don't know if there's much to say in terms of a summary of your season. Usually I have a bit of a spiel, this happened, that happened. But you guys kind of just ended mid-table, just outside the European spots. Moyes is gone. Tear rolling down my face right now, but in comes Lopetegui, right? But yeah, let's talk about maybe a little bit about what Moyes did for you guys, or Moyes did for his boys. Obviously, I have to drop my rhyme. Why don't you touch on that and then tell us a little bit about Lopetegui?
Yeah, it felt like time for Moyes to go, I guess, but it was also weird because we had a lot of success with him, so it was. It became a kind of polarizing topic, I think, among West Ham supporters last year, and I actually found myself week to week kind of swaying back and forth. I mean, we would have a nice run of form, and you would kind of remember the European run, and I mean, we had a European quarterfinal last year, which if you asked a West Ham fan 5 years ago, 6 years ago, they would have immediately signed up for that, and so I think it was the defensive record last year, I think, is what ultimately forced the change. I was looking, I think they conceded 70 plus goals.
74.
And in the 3 seasons, in the 3 seasons prior, they were in the sort of low 50s. So that seemed to be the difference. But I think on paper, it looked like a team that I think they punched above their weight for a few years, and I think he was kind of a victim of his own success in a couple of ways. Now, the lack of depth, I think some people sort of put on him as well. He kind of had his starting 11, and he didn't seem to want to bring in players that sort of didn't fit his system, which is fair. But anyway, it was up and down. The quality of the football wasn't, I think, where West Ham fans think that it should be, and now they have a lot of talent, and we'll see with my exposure to Lopetegui has been obviously just through that one season with Wolves. I don't follow La Liga all that closely, but it seems to be very defensive minded on the surface, but I think the jury's a little bit out in terms of I don't know that he's ever had the attacking talent on paper that he does at West Ham, and so we'll see what things look like this year. But I'm definitely, this is probably the most excited I've been going into a season in terms of the talent and the depth in the squad in a long time.
Yeah, for sure. The one thing that I was the one thing I was worried about in terms of Lopetegui, and the same thing, I mean, going off of his time at Wolves, the one thing that stood out the most to me was the way he used to ruthlessly make subs, especially at halftime. And that scares me as a Fantrax manager owning a West Ham attacker, is like, a few of them are going, let's say, end of round 1, basically round 2, start of round 3 the latest, right? We're talking about your Kuduses, your Bowens, that sort of guys. And I don't know, it felt to me like until I had no other option and there was like a massive drop off in value, then I'm gonna try and maybe get my West Ham guys, because listen, for my first or second pick, I want them to be playing 90 minutes day in, day out, game week in, game week out sort of thing, right? So yeah, that's my only concern about Lopetegui, but who knows, maybe things might have changed, he might have changed sort of thing. But yeah, it's one that it's going to be an exciting journey next season. So I think let's maybe talk about some of the ins and outs from last season. So looking at some of the outs, obviously, I mean, the biggest one and the only one I really want to talk about is Declan Rice. Because I love Masuaku, I love Lanzini, I love Skamaka, all those guys, etc. But one of them is still in the Prem, and that's Rice. And my word, the impact that he had on that Arsenal team. Listen, I didn't know this boy could take corners.
Me either. I traded for him in a league last year, a couple weeks before that started, and I looked like a genius. But he was actually just a throw-in.
Yeah. I dropped him right before that, so yeah. But yeah, do you think that you guys have missed Rice?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we were talking about the sort of defensive record last year in terms of goals conceded. It's hard not to point sort of directly at that change. I think he was so good that he kind of glossed over maybe a lack of sort of talent in the center back positions at times, or the lack of depth in the center back positions at times, and just as sort of the defensive lineup as a whole. And so that was sort of the clearest impact. You could probably attribute 20-ish goals conceded directly to him sort of being removed. And I think, it's hard to replace a guy like, I think he's, I'm a West Ham fan, so I'm biased, but I think he's, him and Rodri to me are the two best CDMs in the league, if not the world. So, yeah, it's nearly impossible to replace a guy like that, especially not in one season. But I think Alvarez is a good player. And I think, the guy, Guido Rodriguez that they brought in this year seems to be a good CDM as well. And so, I think, a couple of guys are going to try to replicate what he did. They never will quite get there, and we need to adjust. And, hopefully this, again, defensive-minded manager will help sort of shore things up back there.
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously going to touch on the players that you have set up maybe for a defensive system, maybe like a counteracting counter-attacking system as well, right? You've got the pace up top. So I mean, speaking of Edson Alvarez, he came in from Ajax. Are you happy with his debut season last season?
Yeah, for sure. He doesn't bring as much as Rice did in terms of the sort of attacking side of things, or just sort of carrying the ball up the pitch. But he's a good player. High motor, kind of constantly trying to get on the ball. So I think defensively he can hopefully again continue to sort of get up to speed and kind of try to fill in for that Rice role and from a defensive perspective. And I think the way I anticipate us setting up this year, I think Paqueta will be sort of next to him in a double pivot, and that will hopefully provide some of that transition into the attack.
Man, you've already, given the double pivot. Now I'm really worried about this asset. He's been a fantasy darling for seasons past. He's got a weapon of a free kick. Yeah, James Ward-Prowse, man. I was so hyped about this move. I remember managers dropping at least 100 fab in multiple leagues, and yeah, he just kind of wilted away, just kind of disappeared, lost minutes eventually, and then now people aren't even trying to draft him in leagues. What's going on there?
I think you summed it up. I'm kind of in the same boat this year. To me, based on who we've brought in, and I guess there's an argument to draft. Like, now he's almost become undervalued, maybe. Because if he does get starts and he is on set pieces, you've got yourself a third rounder in the 7th or 8th round. But it's funny because he's ranked pretty highly in the sort of default rankings in the draft room. So you just see his name every pick you're making for what seems like 5 or 6 rounds, and eventually I start to hover over it, thinking like, all right, the range of outcomes is just so wide. He could be a bench player that provides 20-30 minutes a game, if that, or if he starts, or if Paqueta gets injured or suspended, then all of a sudden you've got yourself a stud in the 8th or 9th round. So I have to think their starting 11, preferred 11 on day one does not include him, which I think is why he's dropping.
Mental, man. Like, honestly, I genuinely hope he gets a move away. And it's no dig at you guys or whatever, but he's way too good to be benched. Like, he deserves playing time. And yeah, who knows, man. This transfer window has been mental already, and I mean, to timestamp this is basically Saturday morning, and Pedro Neto's in London. What the hell is going on? So expect the unexpected. You never know if he goes back to Southampton. Jacob's gonna be a happy boy. Managers are gonna be having a gem on their belt. But yeah, let's move on. Talking about the struggle that might have been exposed at centre back because of Declan's departure. Konstantinos Mavropanos, an ex-Gunner player back in the league, permanently at West Ham from Stuttgart. I thought he was decent last season for you guys. Wasn't like excellent, but wasn't like a terrible or worst centre back that you had, right?
Yeah, I think decent is a good word. I think I always try to give guys. It's the second season when I feel like I really start to judge whether they're someone that could be back there for the long term. So we'll see how this season goes. It sounds like we might bring in another center back, which may push him to sort of the first option off the bench, but and obviously playing in the cups and that sort of thing. And so I think the jury's still out on him, but he definitely showed some quality and made a few mistakes as they all do it eventually. So excited to see what he can do this year with sort of a full year getting acclimated under his belt, and obviously a new sort of defensive system as well.
All right, time to talk about the main man, Mohamed Kudus. He got the most dribbles last season with ease. It was one of those Cole Palmer situations. I don't need to play all the games in the season to beat all you guys, right? I think he was the only one on triple digits for it as well. Let's touch on this brilliant player, man.
Yeah, not a lot to say other than he's fun to watch. he and not just fun to watch, but he produces goals and assists at seemingly a lot of important goals and assists as well. If I just think back to some of the wins that we had in the second half, especially. Yeah, he's awesome. I hope he's around for as long as possible. But I think one day he'll be on to one of the big clubs, and it'll be well deserved because he's fantastic.
Yeah, you've got an absolute gem of a player. I mean, I even rate his celebration, sitting on the advertising board. I remember when I last listened to like the BBC podcast with Michael Antonio, and I think there was like a listener question about Mo Kudus. One thing stood out to me was basically he's like, yeah, Mo Kudus was basically like the first name on the team sheet. And this was like the last season of Moyes, right? It's just like the level of class and like how good he is in training is like it's absolutely ridiculous, and you see it on the pitch, right? So yeah, I'm excited to see what he's gonna do for the upcoming campaign. I've got him I think in one league at least, so thank God for that. So let's go forward to the January window. Nothing really major. I mean, Thilo Kehrer left. I mean, he didn't really play. I do want to give a shout out to Pablo Fornals. He went to Real Betis. I thought he was an underrated player for you guys, man.
Yeah, he was to me, he was like Mr. West Ham, maybe like the heart of the team for the last couple of years. I think the quality of his play, I feel bad even saying it because I've got his shirt up in my closet. The quality of play I think went down a bit over the last sort of half of that season, but I think we still hear stories, whenever there's a transfer. I've heard 2 or 3 times this window at least that he's talked to the potential transfer of the new, some of the new guys that have come in and sort of really promoted his experience at West Ham. So he's still out there sort of representing West Ham from La Liga.
Yeah, I remember he scored a vital goal in your conference journey as well. Was it the semi-final, I believe?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, man. He was a great player off the bench. Honestly, if you had bench leagues, like, he was the assets to go for. So there is one name I do want to touch on before we move on to the current window. He came in on loan from Manchester City. Calvin Phillips, highly regarded by Mr. Southgate himself. But if you saw him play for West Ham, my word, what the hell was that?
I wish I knew. I was excited too that because I mean, if you go back, what was it, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it was who's better, Phillips or Rice, as sort of a young CDM from England, and I think we have our answer, at least for now. But yeah, he did not get off to a good start, and I honestly think it was his first game. I want to say it was against Newcastle. Made a mistake within the first 5 minutes, and it just seemed to zap his confidence. And that just kind of persisted through the rest of the season, unfortunately. So that was a tough one. Tough to start like that, but I don't know that he got enough opportunities to bounce back, I guess, either, because it's not like he was immediately into the starting 11. And so yeah, it'll be remembered in kind of a funny, fond way by West Ham fans, I think.
Definitely. All right. So moving on to the current window, couple of outs. Maybe you can just quickly touch on Angelo Ogbonna and Ben Johnson. I'm just starting from the back, moving forward. But I thought Ben Johnson was a good utility guy to kind of have. I guess he just wanted more playing time. Yeah,
that's it. He's a good player. I don't know that we'll, especially if Aaron Wan-Bissaka comes in and gets finalized. I think that replaces. I think Sofal moves into a bench role, which I think he's a good right back to have off the bench. But yeah, he was a good utility player. He sort of did a job when asked. But I think it was good for him to go find a way to get more sort of consistent playing time.
And Ogbonna was just old.
Yeah, he was a great player for as long. I think he's been there for almost as long as I've been supporting them. I think I started in like 2014, really sort of following them. So he was consistent. Always did what was asked, and West Ham legend, in my opinion. Maybe legend strong, but.
Are you sad to see Benrahma finally leaving? Or was it just one of those situations where it was about to happen? It was due, like...
Yeah, it felt due. He was... When you watched him play, you felt like he was a little bit of, like, just that last clinical pass away from being a real potential star, to be honest, because he was creative, attack-minded, and it always just seemed
as well.
Yeah, it always just seemed to that last pass always seemed to just not sort of go where he intended it. But it was frustrating because you just felt like you were on the verge of having a real star on that wing, and it probably just felt like time for him to find a new opportunity.
Yeah. One name, I mean, I just want to shout out Divin Mubama, tall-ass kid, youth player. I'm surprised he got released. I thought he was good off the bench last season. Yeah, I'm a bit surprised you guys released him.
Yeah, me too. I've been noticing this, and I don't follow the sort of youth players as much, especially with just limited time these days. But there does seem to be a trend where some of these guys in the academy sort of make their way up. They don't find opportunities, and they find their way to other teams, which I don't know that it's hurt us yet, but I do feel like that starts to hurt over time, especially when it becomes a trend and some of the younger guys sort of see a lack of advancement, a lack of playing opportunities, a lack of new contracts, and that can start to hurt some of the sort of long-term depth in the squad. But in a vacuum, I don't think him leaving hurts us in the short term, but those things can start to build up and compound over time.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you're a talented kid and you don't want a future, come join Chelsea. It's the perfect club. Flynn Downs, he transferred to Southampton. Jacob was quite high on him as an asset. What would you say?
Yeah, I didn't follow. I was excited when he came in, and I know he's a West Ham fan growing up, but good for him that he. It seemed like he did really well last year in the Championship, and I think this will be a good test for him to see if he's ready to sort of have a similar impact in the Prem. So I'm rooting for him for sure.
All right, let's talk about these ins. Oh, this is such a different vibe. We actually have signings to talk about. I'll start with Luis Guilherme. Came in from Palmeiras. Is this a kid or is this a player we can consider as an asset for the next season?
I guess a kid, but I don't know that he's that far from being an asset. We could see that start to transition this year. And it'll depend. I mean, we brought in. There's a lot of players that we brought in that sort of play a similar position. So maybe he doesn't get as many opportunities, but I don't think it's that far off. From a dynasty league perspective, he was one I was hoping to get in our draft, and I might have to buy him for too much fab. But yeah, exciting young player. I think he's 18 or 19. But he seems very close to getting first team opportunities. I think we're going to see him come off the bench for sure through the season, and we'll see. If he's pushing for starts, that means he's doing something right. That would be very exciting.
Let's stick to that side of the world. Guido Rodriguez, Argentinian, I believe. Did he win the World Cup as well? What can you tell us about him?
Yes, I can't tell you a ton other than he's a World Cup winning center mid. I think he's 31, but definitely someone we can use. I don't know if he starts or if he's kind of one of those first guys off the bench. But again, just exciting to have quality depth because it just hasn't felt like that in a long time. It felt like there was 11 or 12 or 13 guys that were sort of up for it in the Premier League, and now I think that number is closer to 15, 16, 17.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of depth, West Fotheringham, I'm assuming, is the goalkeeping depth. Does that mean we lose Fabianski?
It seems that way. I haven't heard anything about him leaving, but I think he was also. I think Fotheringham is considered homegrown, so it helps with that quota. But yeah, I expect. It seems like he'll get the cup matches, and Areola will be the starting for the Premier League.
Okay, so now let's talk about some names that we think will get some more minutes. Max Kilman, was he the first signing, I think, for you guys under the Lopetegui era? He obviously played with him during his time at Wolves, the ex-Wolves captain. Really solid centre-back.
Yeah, I guess Guillermo was probably the first, but sort of the Kilman was the first that felt like immediately goes into the starting 11.
Yeah.
It's great that it's always nice having someone that's played for the manager. I think, especially a defensive manager that has a system. He can kind of be whether he's the captain of West Ham. I think Bowen was named captain, but kind of be the captain of the defense and keep people sort of in there where they need to be. So that was an exciting one. Just I think it shows that we're sort of committed to letting Lopetegui kind of bring in his system and sort of build this, and hopefully he has the time to do it. So that was exciting sort of start to the window for sure.
Yeah, I mean, let's now touch on the more exciting parts of this window. One of them being Crescencio Somerville coming in from Leeds. I mean, if managers would have been playing this game while Leeds was in the league, you would know his points potential and how exciting of a player he can be. What are your thoughts, Fletch?
Yeah, I'm very excited. Maybe I tend to obviously over sort of inflate the new West Ham signings, typically, especially the attackers, and sometimes that's worked out well with Kudus, and other times it hasn't paid off as much. But I think even if he can replicate, I remember thinking of him as a streamer for Leeds a couple years ago when he was 19. When he would get the odd start, he seemed to score pretty well, and last year he seemed to really dominate in the Championship. So obviously you sort of apply some dilution to that, I guess, in terms of transitioning to the Prem. But even if he can sort of replicate 80% of what he did in the Championship, he'd be an exciting asset potentially.
Okay, great. Final name, Niklas Füllkrug. If you watch the Euros, you know this beast of a German striker. He's got a freaking strong ass shot as well. I don't know if he's missing a tooth. That might be the case as well. But what are your thoughts on Niklas Füllkrug?
Excited, although cautiously excited, just because we've seen striker after striker come in and just sort of not, whether it was fitting within the system or not sort of translating to the Prem. But he seems like, again, I've thought this about all of them, but he seems like one that can and will. I'm hoping that he's kind of the new Marco Arnautovic for us, just up there sort of bagging goals. So excited about him. Unfortunately, I don't know that I'll end up drafting him because I think his name will sort of push him up in terms of ADP. But in a certain round, I'd be happy to take him as a forward 2 or forward 3, depending on how the draft is going.
Yeah, great shout. All right. Now that we've gone through all the players, can you touch on the system that you guys had last season and what you're expecting for the upcoming campaign, possibly?
Yeah, I don't know that the system will look all that different. I think in terms of where, especially sort of fan track specific, where points will come from. But I think we touched on it earlier, but I think there's we're expecting kind of a 4-2-3-1 with a sort of double pivot there, and I think that'll be the one change where, again, this is expectations for me and just in terms of having the most possible talent on the field, but I'd expect Paqueta to be in that double pivot with Alvarez as sort of the first choice 11, which probably hurts his attacking returns to an extent, but it also means if the 11 that I have in my head is what we roll out, you've got Kudus sort of centrally in front, and then Somerville on the left, Bowen on the right, and Füllkrug up top. So we could be surprised. I mean, I don't know what that does to Kudus' value, because I think it conceptually probably adds some assists and key passes potentially, but maybe a little less of, maybe he doesn't have triple digits in terms of successful dribbles. But it also means that Somerville, I think, would kind of replicate some of what Kudus did last year in terms of points. So I think, ideally things will kind of flow through that double pivot and make its way out to the wings, which, should contribute to value for Somerville and Bowen. Kudus will kind of do his thing. And I think there's the potential that will kind of be fluid as well, right? Where Kudus can kind of float out to wings. I think Somerville has some experience playing centrally as well, and Bowen does. So if it works well, I think it'll look pretty fluid, and there should be points sort of to go around. And I think ultimately, again, there's always an unknown with a new manager, but I think the talent can win out in this situation, regardless of the system, because those guys are just, I think the four attacking players are all very good, especially, and if you add Paqueta up there as they sort of work their way up the field, I think there's some potential for points, but it's probably the widest range of outcomes in terms of Fantrax potential for West Ham that it's been in a while, just because there's a bit of an unknown with the new manager.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So, do you have any sort of idea what you think that backline might look like? I'm assuming Areola's in net.
Yeah, Areola and net, Tillman and either Mavropanos or Aguerd, or potential new signing that sounds like it's getting close with Tobito from Nice.
Yeah.
And then you've got Emerson pretty locked in on the left side. I thought he was great last year. And then same thing on the right. You've got Sofal, but it sounds like Wan-Bissaka is getting close. And then, Paqueta and Alvarez in front of them, and we sort of talked about the front four then.
Yeah, okay, great. Anything else you want to touch on? Any other changes of the club? Any other assets? Or should we move on to the Fantrax side of things?
I think that covers it. That's everything I had in my notes.
Sounds good. All right, time to chat some Fantrax assets. First pick from West Ham, I feel like is an obvious but kind of a close one, maybe.
Yeah, to me it's Kudus, but yeah, close with Bowen. They're both going. Sadly, I don't think I'm going to end up getting either of them this year, just based on where they're going and where my draft picks have fallen.
Are you mid-draft, I'm guessing, for that one?
I had the 5th pick in one league, and they were gone by the time it came back. I had the 11th pick. That's where I could have taken them, but it felt early. The second round and third round this year, forget about West Ham, just to me feels less. You mentioned earlier, like you want to have guys that are going to start, that you kind of know what to expect, and I feel like there's a lot of
uncertainty,
a wide range of outcomes on that entire second and third round. So depending on your league, you could get them. I'd be really happy to get them. I have the second pick in my home league coming up this weekend. I'd love to get them end of the second round, but I don't think they're going to make it there. But I also know that the guys that are picking at the end of the first round are hesitant to pull the trigger at pick 13, 14. So it's an interesting year in drafts so far. Yeah,
definitely. So I guess we've touched on those guys. We've kind of gone into your next 3 picks sort of thing. So after Kudus and Bowen, who have you got?
Then to me it's Somerville, who I do hope to draft, and will probably draft quote too early. To me, I think if you're getting him in the 4th round, you're getting sort of a mini Kudus, or what could be close to what Kudus' output last year, and you're getting him sort of 2 or 3 rounds later. So he's definitely the next one. And then I think there's kind of a drop off because you have the added uncertainty with Paqueta, with the potential suspension, JWP. You're not sure if he's going to start. Fulkrug, unknown. I think people have seen what's happened with other West Ham strikers that have come in. So to me, it's that Kudus, Bowen for sure. Slight drop off to Somerville, although that's where I think the value might be, and then kind of a bigger drop off till you get to Paqueta, JWP. We might see, depending on how well they do defensively, you might see, one of the fullbacks or center backs become sort of a value play at some point. But it feels kind of top heavy this year in terms of Fantrax assets.
Yeah. So the final of the three, then, if we're talking top heavy, have you got Fulkrug as that?
I have been betting on talent and betting on no suspension and taking Paqueta probably a little bit before Fulkrug, but that's also due to a lack of sort of depth at the midfield position, I think.
Yeah.
I haven't drafted with Fulkrug in the pool.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be interesting, but I think it depends on how the roster's coming along and where the value is. But I guess Paqueta and Fulkrug I see as sort of 6th, 7th, 8th rounders, and sort of interchangeable in terms of what you need.
All right, great. Have you got at least one hidden gem?
I feel like I have a few. I don't know if they're hidden gems, but like to me, hidden gem means where the value might be, and I think it could be Somerville. I think you could get a 2nd or 3rd round value in the 4th or 5th.
Yeah,
Paqueta, if he doesn't get suspended, I think could be a pretty consistent sort of 10 points per game. And if you're getting that in the 7th, 8th round because people are worried about the suspension, there's value there. I think one of the hidden gems might end up being from the back line. If they, especially with the point system change for defenders this year, if they show that they're not conceding all of a sudden, whether it's Kilman, I think Kilman was a reasonable streamer.
Agreed.
During that season with Lopetegui. Emerson,
he's got a goal in him as well, I'd say.
Yeah. Emerson has shown that he can get attacking returns. I think he was my hidden gem last year, and I think there was like 3 weeks where it looked smart, and then a few negatives mixed in.
Yeah, I remember with Emerson, he was passing the eye test in terms of getting forward. I remember I was at the Luton, at a pub watching the Luton match with the TDS boys, and he scored the goal, but it was offside. And I was like, cheering his name, and I was getting trolled by people online for it. But I still think he's a class player, man.
Same.
But okay, cool. So, do you have any other hidden gems, or can you bring up your traps now?
I think that JWP, I guess, is the other one. Same thing. He's suddenly become a hidden gem because the assumption is he's not going to start. But if Paqueta does get suspended at some point, all of a sudden I think he slots in. They might have to change the system a bit, or maybe Guido does. And if he gets consistent starts, he's going to be value in whatever round he's going in. That'll be interesting.
Very good point. So who's your trap?
The traps are all kind of the same as the hidden gems.
No, I get that. I get that. Yeah. Because that's what we did on like our Manchester United pod last night as well. He mentioned like Rashford as being a possible gem, but also a trap at the same time. So
yeah. I think. Well, I also think because of the wide range of outcomes, you could argue Kudus and Bowen could be traps at that sort of early 2nd round or mid 2nd round ADP. I could easily see a scenario where that pays off and Kudus could be considered a late 1st rounder. But if they are as defensive as Wolves were a couple of years back, which I that's not my sort of base case scenario for this, but if they are much more defensive than we think, you could regret taking them in the 2nd round, which is it. But again, you can say that about all the 2nd rounders and 3rd rounders this year. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Basically, draft with caution. That's what I think we're telling you. All right. Any other assets you want to touch on, or shall we move on to our final segment?
That covers it.
All right. So now it's time to pick your brain, Fletch. Got a few fun questions, few serious ones. First up, I mean, given the fact that your draft is coming up, do you typically have a draft day tradition? Like, do you wear some lucky West Ham socks? Do you walk around with a pair of hammers? Like,
I'm not very superstitious. I think the tradition is probably me overthinking who I have the second pick, and I don't know who goes first, but I'm pretty locked in on who I want. But I will second guess that right up until the 2-minute clock runs out because it's a live draft.
yeah.
So that's a big tradition is second guessing everything, all the prep that I did, thinking I know who I want, and then last second I'm checking Twitter to make sure they're not injured or getting transferred, or trying to talk myself into, drafting Salah instead because I need a forward to start. So that'll go right up to the wire.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of how you draft, then, do you usually use like an Excel sheet? Or again, do you just go into a panic and just pick whoever's in front of you?
Sadly, kind of both. I've got an Excel sheet that I fine tune sort of leading up to drafts, which should reflect. And I've tried to make it instead of, I guess it's like my rankings, but I try to make it more realistic in terms of who I would pick. So I might think that, if Trippier stays, I think maybe he's, ranked in the top 25, 30.
Yeah.
I just know that I'm not going to draft him in the first, second, or third round.
Yeah.
So I try to reflect that in my rankings to make my Excel sheet actually usable, where I'm not sort of skipping ahead. It's if this guy is there, will I take him? And obviously there's some nuance to that if you draft the midfielder forward first and sort of based on your team needs that starts to happen. But I try to make it a more realistic for like my actual thought process as opposed to just quote where they're ranked.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Do you have any experience trading draft picks?
Last year was the first year I did it.
Was it in our Dino League or something else?
No, it was one of the community leagues.
Okay.
I forget the exact terms of it, but I think I traded out of. I kind of looked at where each of my picks fell, and I traded out of an area where I didn't love the options, and I picked up an extra. I think I traded like a late second round pick and picked up like a late third or a early fourth, and then a fifth. So I got more players in the top sort of 60 on my roster because I wasn't in sort of loving where I was at at the end of the second round. I'd have to look back to see if it actually was beneficial. I want to say it was because I think with one of the picks it was Alvarez in like the fourth round.
Oh wow!
And he did well.
Yeah.
And I forget who. The thing I don't know is who I would have taken in the second to know if it was a good deal or not. But I like anything that adds an added component of strategy to leagues.
So then you obviously play with Fab. So what is your experience with it? And yeah, what sort of manager, what sort of spender are you?
It's been up and down. For every kudos that I get for 100 Fab and feel comfortable with it, I had the Fab lead in the January window last year in my home league and overspent relative to the next bid in an embarrassing fashion just because I felt like I had to do something for Gio Reyna, who Broja had gotten a move, so that was not ideal. So I do think I need to stop worrying about the January window. I see the guys at TDS write about that, and it does seem to be true. In the back of my head, though, I'm like, well, what if there's another Bruno Fernandes?
Yeah, exactly.
And Gio Reyna is not it.
Yeah, not at all. All right. In terms of waiver claims, FA claims, do you have a strategy around that? Do you just listen to my advice, read my articles, or do you go off the data on your own?
Yeah, no, just listening to you and follow your lead. Although I feel like I have a direct line to you on WhatsApp now, so I don't need to worry about listening to a full pod to get your picks.
That
I
is
just
true.
text you as I'm putting in claims. I think I
Yeah.
texted you during my slow drafts too.
I mean, my line is always open to you, buddy.
I've got a lot of lines open too. I got Jacob on the hook for Dino Gems from Southampton.
I'm surprised you didn't throw the Dino victory in my face on the podcast, but yeah, there you go. I brought it up.
I was waiting for you to mention any successes last year to talk about.
Waiver claims, etc. Then do you go form fixtures like a bit of both?
Yeah, I guess a bit of both.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, early in the season, you're always looking for a guy that. I try to keep my rosters to have at least 3 or 4 sort of floating open positions to stream, and then ideally early in the season you try to find a long-term hold, but not too many. Not too many. I try not to get in love with guys that are sort of consistently scoring 8 points, because that doesn't win you leagues. So if you can find one of those sort of long-term holds that's going to get you 10 plus points per game, that's great. And then later in the season, it's more looking at fixtures, especially for streamers. And I think the one thing I'm terrible at is streaming defenders. I hope that this new point change helps a little bit. But I found myself at times wondering if I should just start a player from the bench in my defense just to have a full 11, because I seem to find the negative points whenever I tried to stream that position.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, in terms of trades again from last season, do you have any best or worst moments that stand out?
I think I had a pretty good year in terms of trades. Like I know I traded for Trent in 2 leagues when he was before he was injured, so that didn't work out that well. But when he played in the second half, he was awesome. I think I turned Martinelli into him, and I actually got some fab coming my way in that trade earlier in the season. I traded for Bruno Fernandes as well, but that was more of a guy that was sort of lower in our league, that was trying to avoid relegation and I had Kudus and I think Sterling, who had performed reasonably well leading up to this trade. So I think I traded the 2 of them for Bruno, which worked out well.
Yeah. Fantastic trade there. All right, before we sign off from West Ham completely, given the start of your season, the fixtures are Aston Villa at home, Crystal Palace away, Man City at home, Fulham away, Chelsea at home. Bit of a mixed bag there. Sounds quite difficult on paper. So are there any assets you'd suggest buying low or selling high from West Ham?
I think any of the attackers, if they don't start well. I mean, Villa, I feel like always gives us a hard time. Palace especially does, and obviously you got City in there. So yeah, any of the attackers that don't. And if Somerville, I think it's likely maybe that he doesn't start game week 1. So play on people getting a little nervous about that. Would have worked with Kudus last year, same thing. Wasn't getting starts right off the bat, and obviously would have been worth trading for.
So you're kind of hard to sell high, I guess. It's more a buy low situation.
Yeah, I think so for sure. Because again, if any of the attackers are scoring well, that to me would be an indication like that. I think that would continue, or I would see no reason why that wouldn't continue. So unless there's a guy, maybe if Paqueta scores really well in the first couple weeks, and you want to, and you can convince someone that he's definitely not getting suspended, you could get some value there. But if the attackers are scoring well, that to me wouldn't be a sell high. That would just be a hold and enjoy the ride.
Okay. All right, that brings us to our final question of the pod. So, being an experienced Fantrax manager like yourself, what are some of the lessons learned over the previous seasons that you're taking into your upcoming campaign that you would hope would bring you more success?
I think I mentioned one earlier, and in terms of streaming defenders, and again, it'll be a little bit of a wait and see to see how the point change impacts this, but I don't know what the answer is. I need to find a better approach to streaming defenders to avoid those negatives, because sometimes having a 0 is better than having a -2. Outside of that, I think not holding those players I alluded to earlier as well, not holding those guys that consistently get in the sort of 7 to 9 point range, which can certainly help in a given week, but just remembering that you can find those guys on the waiver wire pretty easily, and trying to think ahead with those extra sort of streaming slots and pick up players before lineups are announced that if they start can get you 12 plus points, maybe like an Oscar Bob type of situation. If I roster him, X number of weeks and he starts a few of them, that could help win a game week here or there. So just being more tactical with those sort of open roster spots and not just getting a safe player, but going for upside. And then it's obviously an easy drop if they don't start.
All right, great. Listeners, that's all we had planned for today's pod. Fletch, it is always a pleasure chatting with you, just catching up with you in general. Still waiting for you to book that flight, hop across the pond. We can finally have that pint, or several, obviously. But yeah, before we sign off, mate, do you have any final words you want to say?
No, excited for another season. I'll be up early, as you know, with a newborn coming probably next week. So I won't miss any of the lineup announcements, that's for sure, this year, even the early ones here. But yeah, no, excited for another season. Thank you for doing this again. Always a pleasure. And yeah, one day I promise I'll get over there. I owe you guys some pints.
Lovely, mate. Congratulations. Very exciting times for you. Listeners, we're almost at the finish line. Just a handful of clubs left. It's been a great journey so far. Hopefully everyone has enjoyed it and can't wait to get the season started, like Fletch said. So we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.